we could create our own micronation out in the middle of the ocean, away from government, away from any kind of control.
If there's a place like that, when do we leave?
People like rag on Waterworld so much, but I love that movie. I love it.
It's good.
Yeah, you're always limited by the warm embrace of the country in which you live.
Imagine that a country trying to come to life, and it's kind of the equivalent of saying like, your existence purely depends on my opinion of you.
Everybody claims that they know the right way, the answer, like the one true way to be happy. And essentially, if they go back to Thailand, they get the death penalty, which seems a little harsh for just wanting to like live in the ocean.
I'm at that realization. It's like, hey, if we all just stop doing this.
If you're really free, you should be able to
opt out.
Yeah, exactly. When did you and I sign a contract?
There once was a man from Venus.
There once was a man from France who lived with bulge in his pants. A girl would walk by, he'd let out a cry, and the sun would be blocked by his lance. We keep voting back and forth and expecting that somehow things are going to get better, but they just get stupider. And yeah, that's where I'm just like, yeah, fuck it. Okay, everybody, welcome to another kitchen sink microscopy yet again. I'm Erik Rosenblatt, and we would love it if you'd like this video and share and subscribe to the channel and all that stuff. That's what cool people do.
Welcome into an on-disc microscopy. Yeah, Casey. We write our own music, and we've been on the radio in Sweden, so I'm just trying to like say hi to our Swedish fans there. If you want to get our music, check us out on Spotify, iTunes, patreon.com/KSMvidcast. We're all over the place. So, yeah. What should we talk about today, Erik?
Well, I think we should probably do something. Yeah,
is that the? I don't know what that is.
It's a boatswain's call. Well, one of many. So I think people who know me personally know that I recently bought a sailboat, just a 27-foot sailboat. So it's not quite a liveaboard yet, but that's my plan. And I think it would be a good idea to talk about something that's near and dear to my heart, and that is seasteading.
Seasteading.
Are you familiar with that?
Yeah, that's a sexual position, right?
It could be. Look it up on the Urban Dictionary, maybe. But
with riding the waves.
If it isn't, well, maybe it's time.
It is now.
yeah. We'll make that one up now. But no. Seasteading refers to sort of okay, you have countries and borders and all this stuff, but then you have areas between that in the ocean. So what's called international waters, which don't have any really governmental control or anything. No claim. It's just kind of in between. And there's a group of people, sort of a loose knit group of people who have this philosophy, like this concept, like, hey, we could create our own micronation out in the middle of the ocean, away from government, away from any kind of control, out in international waters. And it's been attempted a few times, but it's a really interesting idea to me. So yeah, what do you what do you think about that?
Well, if there's a place like that, when do we leave?
Yeah, exactly. Well, there's actually been plans from a variety of different groups. I think the founder of PayPal once wanted to fund this whole thing where you take a bunch of boats and barges and stuff and kind of stitch them together in the middle of the ocean and form your own sort of community.
Waterworld.
Yeah, well, yeah. Oh my God, people like rag on Waterworld so much, but I love that movie. I love it.
It's good.
Yeah, it's an interesting, really interesting story and kind of a take on situations, and yeah, I love it. And that trimaran, oh my God, I want that. Oh, except the only thing that brought it down was Kevin Costner's ego. If it weren't for that, this is the thing, like, the idea is because you can't, like, if you live in a country, even a country like the United States or something, which is sort of independent, like you can kind of get away with some stuff, especially in certain states where you can get like an allodial title and actually own your land. But you really can't do much. You're always limited by the warm embrace of the country in which you live. And so people think, hey, we could be literally free out in the middle of the ocean, because nobody lays claim to that. It's like anything goes in essence. And it's a really appealing idea, especially as someone like myself, like a voluntarist. Like I think it's kind of the only place you can go to actually really be free.
Yeah, and it seems weird, like if it's international, if it's unclaimed or whatever, and places like this establish themselves, is there something like who do you file your paperwork with in order to consider yourself a new continent, or a new country of its own, just out in the middle of nowhere? Like,
that's actually, it's interesting you should bring that up, because I've looked for a long time, like looked up like how exactly a country becomes quote unquote official. And it's kind of like, well, other countries have to recognize you. So you can't just like declare it and it is so. You have to basically get the blessing of other nation states who say, oh yeah, we agree that you're independent and you're your own country now. So if you're doing things the kind of against the grain, shall we say, you probably won't get that blessing. And I have a couple of examples of that, which I will illustrate in a moment.
Imagine that a country trying to come to life, and it's kind of the equivalent of saying, like, your existence purely depends on my opinion of you. Like, put yourself in those shoes in like a social aspect, and how fucked up would that be? And yet here we do it on a global scale. Oh, you can't become a country, we don't recognize you,
Yeah, exactly. It's like, on whose authority? Like that's my whole kind of a core theme of my personal philosophy, is like, where do you derive your authority to claim that or to demand that? Like, I don't know. It's like, so
it's supposed to be a circle, you know, right? Like people elect these people who watch over them or guide them or make choices for them or whatever, and it just feeds back around. So I mean, it's like it's not necessarily that authority has to be like a string that somebody's holding from the top, but more like an Ouroboros, our Bob or us.
Well, isn't that kind of like circular logic? Like the state exists because people believe in the state, kind of thing.
Uh, I don't
Oh,
know
we're
that
getting down into
logic.
like off the bat. We're getting down into some deep philosophical territory here,
Yeah.
and
um,
it's
but,
all your fault.
yeah, that's my thing.
Mhm.
Well, anyway, we're getting kind of off the seasteading and into political philosophy here, aren't we?
Well,
So,
I think they're actually interconnected, and the examples I'll give will kind of illustrate that to some extent.
yeah,
But that, yeah, what if people don't want to elect people, but just want to live just independently? You know, why should there necessarily be some kind of governing system? Like, what if? Because it's like people want to create communist societies or anarchist societies or something like that, and you know, why can't they do that in small proportions?
yeah,
And why does it require the blessing of nations to
yeah.
be legitimate, basically?
Right,
Um,
yeah. Like our individual philosophies are allowed to be thought, you know. So
mhm.
comparing it again, it's like, you know, we are supposed to be providing, you know, safe places, whether or not we agree with it, for things like, um, well, let's say atheism could be translating to the a government style, you know.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and that actually, yeah, I could explain how those two things correlate, but yeah, that's a good point. And I think it's important to allow uh, these kind of petri dish experiments to take place, because everybody claims that they know the right way, the answer, like the one true way to be happy. And it's individualistic. It's like, you know, not everybody wants the stuff that everybody else wants. And so if you're in this place where the majority wants something, well, you're kind of like shit out of luck at that point. Like you have to abide by when in Rome, basically, you know. And so there is no place on the planet, no land based, like you cannot be on the surface of the planet, like the land coming out of the ocean, and be away from that. There's claims to every spot on the planet. So the ocean
Sure,
is kind of the last frontier.
there's some like small islands, I think that.
Probably here and there, but like, you know, in the United States, let's say, I
Right.
can't just be like, oh, I'm going to buy up this land and I'm going to create my own commune, right? Or my own anarchist society or something like that. And I think that's unfortunate, because maybe that is the right way. We don't know. Nobody's ever really been allowed to experiment that way, except maybe that place in California that, oh, I'll throw it in. There's a book written about it that I bought that's really, really interesting. It's kind of like this hippie artist place where there's like no law, no rules, and everybody just like kind of builds their own stuff, and it's actually really cool. And I highly recommend people read the book. I'll throw in like an image or something up here, and maybe we'll put a link in the description, because it's pretty cool. And somehow it exists in California of all places, um, I think. But it very, very rarely are things like that really entertained, and certainly not in a large scale. So I like the idea of people kind of going off and doing their own thing and testing these ideas. It just kind of sucks that you would have to like tie a bunch of boats together to actually do that. You know, being a person of science, I think, you know, we should be testing ideas and not just like dismissing them because we have a different philosophy.
Yeah. Earlier you said there's no land that you can be on in the United States because it's all owned by the government or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's a given on land. There's airspace that belongs to the country. But is there a certain subterranean level to which it stops being a country and just like a chunk of the earth?
Ooh, that's interesting because there is an upper limit to the air. So I wonder if there's a lower limit to the land. Like, could you dig underground and create like a subterranean nation under the ground, like a mile below the earth or something like that?
Maybe it's already in existence.
The hollow earth. That's where Hitler disappeared to. Oh man. I mean, it's really interesting though. Yeah, because it's like we kind of like base things on the skin of the earth and don't really pay too much attention. Like, I know that beyond a certain threshold, if you're in the air, you're kind of basically in space and
Right.
you're not really beholden to the nation that you're flying over.
Mm-hmm.
So beneath the earth, maybe so. I never really thought of that. Like, that's interesting.
Huh.
Yeah.
So all these landowners could be like, huh, the volume upon which I'm sitting has grown exponentially. My land should now be worth like however much it was per cubic meter or something, and all of a sudden that is like jack up the
It's
price of the
not
home.
no longer square footage. But then again, if you're autonomous and you're beyond their reach, it doesn't matter. Like,
Right.
if you dig down a mile below the surface and you start creating your own cities underneath the earth, like, well, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
I mean, and it shouldn't, because it doesn't even impact people as long as you're not like creating a, you know, huge hollow that's going to collapse and destroy everything. But yeah, so
Which it could.
huh?
Which it probably could.
Well, yeah. I mean, I would hope that people who tunnel under the earth and dig out these caverns would have a little bit of common sense and kind of at least know how to do that without destroying everything, which would destroy you as well in the process. So they're got an interest in not dying. So like, as far as examples though, there's two that I can think of, like off the top of my head, that are really key. I'll start with the smallest one and go to the bigger one. There's companies that are building these floating pods, I guess. If I can find a picture, I'll throw it up in up there, over there. Yeah, there will be a picture over there of these things, and they have like a weight at the bottom, a shaft, and the thing can move up and down to kind of like bring you above the water or closer to the water. And it's like basically a little tiny house floating on the water. And you could buy these; they'll haul them out into the ocean. You can live on them. And the idea was there could be a community of people. So somebody would buy one, and they're actually not that much money for what they are. So somebody could buy one, another person would buy another. They'd kind of link up, and there'd be a little community of these little tiny houses in tiny boats, I guess, in the middle of the ocean, out away from everything. And so a couple from Thailand, well, I guess the husband came from the US and the wife was from Thailand, I think, and they bought one and placed it out in international waters beyond the internet, like the boundary of Thailand. And the government of Thailand wasn't having any of it. And so they said, oh, well, you guys are interfering with like trade routes and stuff, like shipping lanes and everything. And they while they were out, confiscated it. And I think now there's like essentially, if they go back to Thailand, they get the death penalty. which seems a little harsh for just wanting to like live in the ocean, which shows me, it illustrates to me that governments are very fearful of people striking out on their own and doing their own thing and being independent. Because
Well,
it's two people out in the water. Like, why is that a threat?
have you seen the Truman Show?
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Got to be a reason they want to hang on to us so much.
Well, yeah, exactly. Because if the illusion is lost, if people lose faith, then that's it. That's the end of it. And
I'm at that realization. It's like, hey, if we all just stop doing this, like,
yeah,
it stops working, right? So yeah, just the way things have been going, I'm starting to think more about like not necessarily anarchy, but like crushing entirely what we have and just replacing it with like several ideology groups or whatever, political groups, whatever you want to call it, like parties, I guess. But I just, get rid of that terminology just to completely disconnect it from governments of old.
Yeah, I honestly, like, I'm on board with that. Like, there are people who have political or philosophical ideologies I disagree with, but it's like, as long as you're left over there to do your own thing and I'm left to do my own thing and we can get along, like, I'm cool with that. Like, I don't care. Like, and I think the idea that like balkanization is probably inevitable, especially in the US, a country this big with this many people, having only essentially what amounts to two official ideologies that really aren't that different nowadays. It's probably time to break things up, and people be a lot happier for it.
Yeah.
And I think we get along better. I just want everybody to get along. Can't we all just get along?
Yeah. Yeah. Wouldn't it be interesting if just like all the governments in the world, one of them was like, hey, have you guys ever noticed there's like 2 or 3 things in each of our ideologies that's like exactly the same or whatever? But I don't know if I'm making sense. I have 2 hours of sleep.
Yeah. You haven't had a lot of sleep. That's okay. No, I'll try to pick up the slack here. It's yeah, and it's interesting too because I think people there's quite a few thoughts here I'm trying to kind of like decode and put into boxes and stuff. So forgive me if I am a little bit I don't know, not quite focused. But I constantly hear this term like faith in government. Oh, people are losing their faith in government. And I'm like, wait, that's a religious term. Like, isn't that a good thing? It shouldn't be faith. It ought to be like logic and reason. Like there should be a purpose behind our philosophy and not just blind faith.
Yeah. Faith in politics is how you get people who vote on party lines. They don't want to listen to anything else.
Exactly. Yeah. It should be like, it should be the things that you care about and people who are running for a particular office should be talking about the things they care about. You shouldn't be looking for D's and R's and L's and G's and whatnot. Like that should be irrelevant. But it's gotten to the point where it's like it's so polarized and yet so similar that it's like almost a joke at this point. Happily, I think a lot of people are figuring that out. Like recently, I was listening to the radio and they were talking about like voting stuff for, I think, the primary election. I don't know. It's been a while for me, so sorry. But and they were saying something like, oh yeah, well there was like a 20% voter turnout, or maybe it was like 13%, and I was like, wow, that's shitty. Are you seriously? wow, man, like there was a time people actually cared, and people just don't give a shit anymore. And maybe that's a good thing. It's time for, like, as far as I see it, it's time to try something new. It's time to go in a different direction. Like it's the whole like definition of insanity thing, which I know is a complete like trope, that doing the same thing over and over again, expecting different results and stuff, like,
Yeah.
but that really is the case. We keep voting back and forth and expecting that somehow things are going to get better, but they just get stupider. And yeah, that's where I'm just like, yeah, fuck it. So I do want to get back to the seasteading thing. The other example, which I think is really telling, is the example of Sealand. Oh, by the way, I'm a knight of Sealand, so I mean, nowadays you just donate some money to the cause and they'll give you stuff and stuff. It's a really cool idea, and I'm happy to support people that think outside the box, I guess. So people should look up Sealand. They have, I think it's sealandgov.org is their official site. So the deal is, way back in the day, some people commandeered an old abandoned World War II platform that was way out, like I think it was like 6 kilometers or something like that, out in the ocean off the coast of England, and you know, it was just abandoned. So they took it over, and they're like, well, it's in international waters, so here we are. I think they had like a pirate radio station. They did some other stuff, but then they were like, you know what? We're going to declare ourselves a country. It's going to be called Sealand, and I'm the prince. And like they had formulated all these rules and stuff, which actually are really interesting and pretty good, like well thought out rules that should actually be accepted by every nation. Honestly, the code of chivalry for the Knights of Sealand is really, really nice. But anyway, so there's all kinds of crazy shit that happen, like a kidnapping and a helicopter raid and all kinds of things that happen. And they finally got it back because, yeah, that just look up the history of Sealand and you'll see. So anyway, the government of England didn't like the fact that these people were there and were essentially autonomous and independent. And so they tried to take it over. And I think there was some exchange of fire and some stuff that happened. But then Parliament decided, you know what? We're going to like move the boundary of the international waters from like 6 kilometers to 12, and which engulfed Sealand. And it's like, well, it's totally arbitrary. And they're kind of on a like tenuous kind of relationship where England sort of like allows them to be there as long as they don't squeak too much. But you know, that's the thing. It's like, yeah, so if you try to do this, if I went 200 miles off the west coast of the US and founded my own like floating island nation, they'd be just like, well, it's 200 miles now.
Yeah.
And then come with guns blazing and stuff like that.
That is effectively the most like precise war ever. Like you're engulfing another, like, you know, broken off nation or whatever, and you're just saying that's mine now. Nothing you can do about it.
Well, and it's changing the rules. It's moving the goalposts. Like, you've set the bar, right? You say, okay, it's this far away from the coast. So somebody's like, okay, fine, I'm going to do this. And then you say, well, it's that far from the coast, which is, I mean, it's like, it's kind of hypocritical. It's like, you know, then at that point, the rules don't matter anymore. If you don't adhere to your own rules and you're not consistent, then it's bullshit. And I have no, like, again, I've lost my faith in such a system. And there's examples of that, like just not involving seasteading, but just involving like the hypocrisy of what government says and does. And it's a whole mess right there. But yeah, it's like, if people just want to be left alone, why can't they just be left alone? Like, why do we need somebody like telling us what to do? I mean, I don't care. Just leave me alone. Let me live my life. Do what I want to do. I'm not going to harm anybody. I just want to be left alone. If it kills me, fine. I'm not asking for handouts. I'm not asking for any kind of special consideration or anything, but just fucking leave me alone. And that's not good enough. And yeah, but that's the thing. It's like the other than maybe like the moon, the last place you can go is the middle of the ocean.
No, with the moon though, you know, the second you went up there and you're like, look, I Elon Musked my way up here and, you know, built a novel, unique, patent pending way to live on the moon or whatever. And then here comes the US government. Well, we were the first ones here, and there's that flag over there that says so.
Yeah.
The moon
and then you go, by the way, that flag is bleached white. Like, I don't see a flag. I see no flags. But well, that's a good point. And speaking of the moon and such things, people should read "The Moon is a Harsh Mistress" by Robert A. Heinlein, because it does touch on that, like a rebellion, a revolution on the moon, people trying to be separate from Earth. It's a great story. So that's my book recommendation for today. Yeah, but it's like,
you know what? In another episode that we had, I think toward the end of season 1, we talked about colonizing Venus. And it's like, well, you've not only left your country, you've left your planet. So are you really even connected to a government anymore? Are you connected to your Blockbuster membership anymore?
Yeah.
You know?
No, actually, that's a great point. Like, where does the line end? Like, if the borders around a country only surround that country within so many kilometers or miles, and only go up so far into the atmosphere or so far below the surface, how can they lay claim to another planet? I mean, it's basically like squatters' rights, right? Like, if you are not there actively doing something in a space and somebody comes in and does something in that space for a certain amount of time, like, let's say you have 200 acres of land and you have this 1 acre plot that's your house and your little farm that you have, but you do nothing with anything else. And some squatters come in, like way on the outskirts, and they establish a little homestead and they build a house and they build a farm and they do all this stuff. Well, even the law, as flawed as it is, sides with those squatters. Like, they're actually doing something. You've essentially abandoned that. It's like throwing stuff out on the curb of your house. You've let it go. You're not doing anything with it. And so to lay claim to another planet, like, when was the last time anybody actually, like, human beings physically set foot on the moon? The 70s? So if people went there today, yeah, and established a colony and started living there, they own that space. There's no way the people that essentially left it be can possibly, it doesn't matter who was there first. It matters who's doing something there.
Yeah.
Within a certain frame. Obviously, if like you go to work and somebody occupies your house and starts like cleaning the floors and stuff, well, that's a little too soon. But if the house is falling apart and they come and they fix it up and you've never been there in like 30 years, well, it's now that other person's house because you really have technically abandoned that. And we've done the same thing with the moon. And we've never sent people to Venus or Mars. So the first people to get there kind of own it.
Yeah. Yeah, it gets you to thinking like, why have like these tightly bound borders? You gotta like get permission from a bunch of people in the world if you want to travel from one random place to another random place. You
Yeah.
know, with all these imaginary lines drawn around them. Yeah, like the whole world basically gets to decide where you get to go or don't go.
Well, yeah, and not just the whole world, but like individual places that have said, well, this is my territory.
Yeah.
And somehow they have the authority to do that because other places that have done the same have said, "Oh yeah, you're legit." Like I don't get that. And actually, I'm going to do a minute microscopy on borders soon. Um, yeah, it doesn't make any sense. Like it's completely arbitrary. It's
Yeah.
just made up. Like look at like the border between like Mexico and the U.S. from space, or the border between like Canada and the U.S. from space.
Yeah.
Uh, I
Well,
don't
and
I
those
don't see.
imaginary lines change over time too. And it's like, did something change like on a quantum level, or like is there something special about that line right there
Well,
being
yeah, and
over
the
there
thing is,
now?
if you move the line, you haven't changed the people. Like
Right.
the people that live in those places are still the same. Just because you draw some different political line on a map, like it doesn't actually change the people. Because to me, I look at it and I think the differences between people are not national, it's cultural. And cultures sort of are small little pockets of, kind of a localized sort of
Well,
philosophy.
okay, so just a few hours north of you is British Columbia, Canada.
Hmm.
And I've when I was living around there, I would go back and forth to Canada quite often, and you can see that cultural flip flop just 1 mile over the border or something.
Hmm.
Like it's kind of a different place, and we allow that to happen because we're building these imaginary borders that no one wants to go near unless they're properly vetted or whatever.
That's the thing. Like those arbitrary lines create that division. It's not like a natural thing. Like people are naturally gravitating to an area and the culture arises from that. It's that there is a militaristic divide between things. Like I can't just drive from here to BC and be okay. I can't go to Tijuana without some kind of checkpoint or vetting, whether I should actually be there or not.
When I was driving through Arizona and New Mexico, I got pretty close to the border, I guess. And I come up across like a customs station, and I was like, oh shit, did my GPS screw up and like take me to Mexico? And like I pull up, and there's a military guy there, and I was like, I think my GPS is broke. I'm not in Mexico, am I? And he's like, oh yeah, man. Like it was like a mile back that way. And I was like, what? And he was like, I'm fucking with you, man.
and,
We do this every like 100 miles away from the border in problem areas or whatever. But I was
well,
freaked out. I was like, what?
and that actually, that's an interesting thing because those were not military people. Those are borders and customs
Mm.
people. They're not police. They're not soldiers. They're just workers that work for that company, officers, I guess you could call them. But yeah, the border uh, checkpoints, whatever, border patrol, customs, they have dominion over 100 miles within all borders of the
Huh.
country, all the way around. So they could have a checkpoint and ask you stupid ass questions like, "Are you a U.S. citizen?" or something like that, or
Oh my God.
ask you to pull over and check you for drugs. Is probably, I'm sure drugs is like the main thing.
Yeah.
Um,
I like it. I was wondering, like, when did customs start? When did that become a thing?
mm,
And is it in Europe? because it seems like people come and go through from one European country to the next, and you can do it in a day sometimes. Like, people just kind of mingle about over there. Do they do this stuff too, or is it just our xenophobia?
I think they do have something similar, like as far as the structure, but their practices are different. So they're not as zealous as we are in the U.S. And a lot of this, because at some point we're probably going to talk about the Patriot Act. Because of the Patriot Act, there was a tripling of those people, the staff from customs, border control, ICE, and all that shit. Because of that. Before that, it was a minimal staff, and they didn't really care. And now all of a sudden, like, gotta get those terrorists.
Yeah.
But we're leading into like a different episode. But that is a thing, that because of 9/11, all that changed, and everybody got all stupid in the head and everything.
Yeah, because when I was a kid, I used to go up to Canada, wouldn't even need a passport.
You could do that in Mexico too. You could just drive down there. Nobody gave a shit.
Wow.
Yeah. And that's how it should be, honestly. Like, we should be able to just go to different places. Like, if you're a dick and you're going to blow something up, well, that's different. But just because you come from a certain place doesn't mean you're more or less likely to do that.
Yeah, and I mean, I could see like our government having just the tiniest bit of good reason for saying, hey, we're not letting you leave this country, kind of like a North Korea thing, because yeah, but I'm kind of trying to get to a point.
Please qualify that.
Yeah. Because I would listen to that, like, sure, I make this clear just slightly. I would pay attention to the logic of that, just because you at least pay your government some tax. But having another country say, oh, we're not going to let you in, well, what kind of authority do they have over me? What do I owe them in terms of like respect for their laws or whatever?
That could be its own episode. But that's a good point. Like, and why the difference between different countries and everything, and everybody just says, well, that's just the way it is. We all respect it. Like, we have faith in it for reasons, like, because we vote on some politicians. I don't understand where that authority comes from. And it's a circular logic kind of thing. If you ask, say, if you were to ask the government, like, where do you derive your authority from, it would end up in a circular argument. And we should probably do like a whole episode just on what you just said, actually.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, it's like we're the land of the free, but we don't have the freedom to leave.
Mm-hmm.
We're free to do pretty much anything else except leave.
Well, or come into this country. Like, there's a whole process for that.
Yeah.
And yeah, if you're a citizen of the U.S., you have to pay a fee to leave the country, like, permanently. If you want to just like say, you know what, fuck you, I'm out of here, you have to pay for that.
Yep.
Which is crazy, and it's kind of a lot of money. And if you here's the thing, if you have assets, you have to pay even more money because they want their taxes.
Yeah, but what was I gonna say? Isn't there a situation where like you leave the country without doing it the correct way or whatever, and you live in another country and you're working, they can lay claim to like 15% of like some kind of like chunky ass tax for you just living in a different country.
Yeah, and in fact, as a U.S. citizen, the land of the free, if you go to another country and you work there, you're obligated to pay income tax on the income you generate working in some other country. And you might even have to pay income tax again in the country that you moved to, like double tax. Wait a minute. We don't do that with sales tax. Shit, there's like so many people from Oregon that come to Washington and they're like, oh, I'm an Oregon citizen. I don't pay sales tax. And so it's like, okay, can we apply that to internationally, I guess?
I thought they stopped doing that a while back.
I don't know if they did, but they did as of like the early 2000s.
I do remember that being a thing, but I thought they kind of did away with that.
Well, I always thought that was like really silly because if you think about it, so if an Oregon citizen comes up to Washington and, you know, they don't pay sales tax, they have income tax, and they're allowed to buy something without paying sales tax because they're a citizen of Oregon. Does that mean me as a Washingtonian going to Oregon, I'm obligated to pay sales tax or something because my state charges sales tax? Like,
well, it's kind of like the people like respecting the religious culture of another place, you know, like, oh, well, he's not used to paying sales tax, so
yeah,
he doesn't have to pay sales tax. But it's like, yeah, it's still sale. The tax is on the act of the sale.
Well, and this is the goofy thing. Like as I understand it, sales tax is charged based on the place where something is purchased.
Yep.
Not on the origin of the person purchasing.
Yeah.
So I mean, we dealt with that running a business, like the whole like Kent with like you cross a street and it's completely different sales tax. Like, oh fuck, yeah. What a mess. So it's based on where you're buying it, not on where you came from. So I don't know how they were able to get away with that. But like anything goes, you know.
It's almost like we're making this shit up as we go.
Mm-hmm. We always do. I mean, honestly, this particular episode, we didn't even know what we were going to talk about until I tapped something on my phone.
And we've kind of gone all over the place, but
yeah, I want to come back to the idea of seasteading, unless you have more to add.
Well, I was gonna jump back to your examples. The example that sprang to my mind, even though it's not out in the sea, was that CHAZ, the Capitol Hill Autonomous Zone.
Yeah,
that was basically kind of the same premise, only it was more like they were actively taking something that was already claimed. But
the issue with that the issue that I see with that is that they didn't like voluntarily purchase that space, like trade with somebody. They kind of just like occupied it. I'd be totally okay if they talked to everybody and bought those spaces and said, hey, we're CHAZ. We could do what we want, bitch. Like that'd be fine. I
don't think they had a whole lot of time to create committees and have planning meetings and stuff. It just kind of happened.
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting experiment.
I mean, the fact that it went 3 weeks and it was respected as what it claimed itself to be, I was pretty astounded at that. Like, that's kind of a cool precedent that's like tolerated, and probably would have been tolerated a lot longer if it weren't, like you said, you know, just kind of a taken zone.
Yeah,
you know, that they didn't really make any arrangements with the residents or the business owners there. And I mean, before the fact, they did after in some cases. But,
yeah, and
the whole idea of it though kind of reminds me of seasteading.
It's kind of similar, and I think unfortunately the thing that tarnishes that is that it was a political movement, and not just people yearning to breathe free. Like if I bought like, if I went to Nevada and bought like 1,000 acres of land, just a huge tract of land, and said, you know what, we're an independent nation, the U.S. government would not have that. So if you're, I think the whole the reason that CHAZ was allowed to exist, or CHAZ CHOP, was they didn't see it as a serious thing. And if you're actually serious, I think shit's gonna get serious. It depends on how much control and wealth you wield. Actually, that reminds me, like, an organization that I have a huge problem with, Disney. So because of the copyright stuff, like extending the copyright deadline to protect that old ass Mickey Mouse, Steamboat Willie or whatever like that. Oh man, that Jesus. It's now like cultural. Like, just let it go. But anyway, Walt Disney had this whole like Epcot thing. Like, actually look into Epcot, by the way, because it's kind of a cool idea. He had this idea for creating this like perfect city, a planned city, which is a bad idea because you can't plan for how things are going to go when you bring people in. But it was a cool idea. And so when Disneyland existed, Walt Disney bought a bunch of land in Florida to create Disney World. And somehow, don't ask me how this actually happened. I have no idea. But the Disney company was able to lobby the state of Florida to take that land and turn it into their own municipality. So Disney World is its own city, I guess you could say, or a township or something like that. So if they want to build something, they ask themselves for a permit. They actually have a permit that allows them to create a nuclear power plant. Yeah. Like, which is awesome. Like, I'm all about nuclear power. Like, I think I cannot stress it enough. That's the wave of the future.
It's not going to be Skynet. It's going to be Disney.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. But yeah, Disney's like its own city. It's a private city, which is crazy. And but it only happened because they were in the right place at the right time. They had the resources. They were able to like pull strings and push levers and stuff and manipulate the government to get what they wanted.
What I thought you were going to say is Disney worked out a deal with Florida to make Disney World a literal chunk of California or something. I can see that.
Because when Disneyland was made, there were all kinds of mistakes and problems and issues. And so Walt Disney, when he went to make Disney World, took all that in and was like, hey, we're going to make sure that this isn't going to be a problem in the future. We're going to buy this like massive piece of land. We're going to like pay off all these politicians, which that's a problem. We're going to pay off all these politicians, extract some favors, probably buy hookers and blow, and ensure that we can always control our domain. And I got to hand it to him. That like, nice move, bro. Yeah. But yeah, Disney World, if they wanted to, because they're their own municipality, could actually power their facilities off of a nuclear power plant. and we can't as regular citizens, which sucks.
Yeah.
I think like the most eco thing you could ever do is have a home nuclear power plant, but that'll be its own episode. Like, hmm.
Or, you know, just like a hadron collider on the side of your house or something.
Mm-hmm. No, it's gonna make black holes. Oh my god. Oh, oh man. Yeah, that. So we should probably like go back into the seasteading thing at least a little bit. I mean, we're getting close to an hour in, which I think is good. But yeah, what do you think about the idea of people kind of breaking free and doing their own thing and going out and living their life without government in the middle of the ocean?
Yeah, I mean, the only real autonomy I think is super critical is to God damn it, I'm losing my thought.
So you had like 2 hours of sleep, so it's okay.
I basically just kind of wanting to say, like, you should be able to come and go freely in the country. Like, if you're granted freedom as a citizen, like, the automatic freedom should be the ability to just deny that at any point. And I don't know.
Well, that's a good point. Like, if you're really free, you should be able to
Opt out.
Yeah, exactly. And yeah, come in and go as you please. Like, the way I see it, you're not a citizen of a country. You're a citizen of the planet Earth. That's it. Like, if you've ever stared out into space in the middle of the night and seen how small we are, how like insignificant this planet is, how distant everything is from each other, like, space is dangerous. And I like, as soon as you realize that, it becomes more evident that we're all the same. Like, we're in it together, I guess.
Yeah.
And yeah, like this whole like national division and borders and all this stuff, like it creates the conflicts that everybody complains about. And it's like, you know, if we look at the blue marble, you'll realize, like, we're just earthlings, I guess. Yeah.
If you really think about it, actually, the choice of opting out, can you think of a place where that's usually vacant? The choice to opt out?
Well,
Like a contract, right?
yeah.
It's usually written in there. There's no walking out of this. This binds you legally to, you know, do whatever the terms are or whatever.
Oh, it's interesting you should mention that.
Yeah, so
because
we're not really free whatsoever, because we're under contract as citizens to remain citizens for the term of the contract.
the interesting thing about that is, when did you and I sign a contract?
Exactly. Yeah.
Well, and if we did,
default by birth, basically.
well, but then again, you have to be 18, an adult, to enter into a contract legally. So there's that.
Kids can form their own country.
Yeah. Oh, Lord of the Flies. Here we go. But I mean, that's a good point that you bring up. Like, when did we actually enter into this contract? Like, where do you sign? If you're simply born and you're entered into it by default, like, wait, we have laws. I cannot, or I could not, as a 14-year-old kid enter into a contract because I was too young. So what, suddenly I turn 18 and all of a sudden I'm on the hook to like follow all these rules and stuff like that, and now I'm a citizen, I've got to pay $2,000 if I want to leave? That's crazy.
I don't know that you could actually, like, if you were a 6-year-old, if you could just walk out of the country and claim you're no longer a citizen. They'd probably find some way to legally even like fight the 6-year-old.
Well, and that's probably because follow this logic. Since you're not actually an adult, you're technically property of your parents, which makes you a slave, by the way. And so if you walk away from the country as a 6-year-old, you're a runaway. And the state will come after you, abduct you, bring you back to your captors. And there you go. And then when you turn 18, well, guess what? You've somehow robo-signed that contract, and now you're here to stay. Like, it's like catch-22. You're damned if you do, you're damned if you don't. Like, you can't get away from it. And then you go into the middle of the ocean, form a community. You think, oh, I'm in international waters. Like, I'm totally good. And they're just like, we're just going to move that line that far. And now you're fucked.
Yep.
Yeah, yeah, the best thing to do is go to another planet, which, like, why do I have to go into the middle of the ocean and risk being eaten by the Kraken to be actually free? Why do I have to go to Venus, a planet with sulfuric acid atmosphere and pressures that can crush like a tank? That's what I have to do to be free.
There once was a man from Venus.
You're going to bring up Limerick, aren't you? Oh, I'll bring up my own. There once was a man from France who lived with bulge in his pants. A girl would walk by, he'd let out a cry, and the sun would be blocked by his lance. I made that up in high school. And my teacher gave me a good grade for that.
Nice.
So we've gone from freedom and seasteading and government and interplanetary colonization to limericks. Awesome. It's perfect. Mm-hmm.
I know that's going to be a sound clip.
Mm-hmm. I'll throw it in at the end, I think.
Oh, that was awesome.
This is actually like a really good episode, and I feel like we could probably go on quite a bit.
I never realized how many different threads you can pull from that. That one seemingly small topic of a rare occasion that usually gets thwarted, and all this complexity comes out of it.
Yeah, this is actually really good. Man, we gotta do more ideas from a hat. It might just be the beer talking, but we
could be beer, lack of sleep.
Right. I feel like here's the thing. We might be a little bit drunk, but we're still intellectually, we're still like way above, like light years above the average politician. So
nicely drunk.
She rides. My favorite episode, White Hole. Oh my god. That's Red Dwarf, if anybody doesn't know.
Oh, if they're fans of the show, they'll probably already be fans of Red Dwarf from all the lines we keep pulling from.
We could quote it endlessly. Oh man. No, this is actually like a really good conversation. I feel like it's as usual, it opens up like a completely different branch, like another tangent we could go down. But we did cover it pretty good, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thanks for deep sink diving out in the middle of international waters.
Is that deep sink or deep sea diving?
That's actual, like the actual saying, deep sea diving.
Yeah. Yeah, and keep the conversation going down in the comments and stuff. And yeah, I'd love to hear other people's views on the whole seasteading movement and like pretty much everything we talked about. Someday we'll get to the whole voluntarism thing and talk about it. But for now, I think we've actually we've covered quite a bit.
We've got to volunteer the time to talk about that one.
Do we need a talking stick? I don't know if that actually cut over to you because
not.
You didn't say anything. But yeah. Mm.
Oh, geez. All right. Well, on that note, that's enough beer.
Yeah, that's a good point to end. I think we're drunk enough.
Thanks for deep beers diving.
Deep beers diving.
Deep beers.
Mighty fine beer.
Lager.
Totally like intimate inside jokes that nobody else is ever gonna understand. Oh man. Yeah, that all right, well, I think it's a good point to end on. So have a good night, everybody, and sail safe.